Good morning. Many situations in our world today, not least of which is the Ukraine situation, invite us to think about how we live in the world as it is, how we live in the midst of deep suffering and struggle, sometimes in our own lives, but certainly in the life of the world. When we see those stories on the news, and our hearts are moved and our spirits crushed as we see the human pain and struggle, the human story. How do we live with that? How do we live with our own personal pain and tragedy, the experiences of our lives that lead us into despair and angst and uncertainty? How do we live with that? What does it mean? There's a story, an ancient story that Luke tells. It's a story of Jesus. He says, there was once an unjust judge, a magistrate, a person who adjudicated on the law. And there's a woman, a widow. In her culture, someone who was very poor, desperate. She lived in a patriarchal society, and when her husband died, she had no rights, she had no power, she had no one to look after her interests. There was no male in her life to look after her interests in a world that respected only males. And so she was at the whim and mercy of other wealthy, powerful people, mainly men, who would come in and handle her affairs and usually ripping off the widows and the orphans, sometimes leaving them without anything and destitute, sometimes just taking most of their money. And this woman was desperate. But no one was there to look after her, to plead her case before the magistrate, who it said didn't care about people or about God or anything. And so this desperate woman had only one thing she could do, and that was to pester this magistrate day in and day out. Every day she would get up, get her resolve, and go and visit his house or workplace, wherever it was, and ask him, beg him, plead with him, harass him to do the right thing and to bring justice to her life. To restore justice and make sure she got what she needed and deserved. And each day she would go and harass this guy, and he'd brush her off and push her. Oh, get away, woman. Who are you? A little one, a nobody. Get away. I've got more important things to do. And each day she would do this, and every day she would go back and back and back. And in the end he grew so tired of it, he said, what's the point? This woman is going to annoy me till the end of time if I don't do something and get rid of her. And so because of her persistence, he pleads a case and gives her what she needs and gets rid of her. And Jesus turns to the people around and says, well, look, that judge, that magistrate who cared nothing for people, was so concerned or so annoyed by this person, this woman, that he did the right thing in the end, even if it was wrong for reasons. How much more will God give us what we need and what we ask for when we ask? God who loves. And he finishes it, will I find faith on earth? Will the Son of Man find faith on earth when he returns? It's a story for Luke's community who are living in between the times, much as we do. Between this time of Jesus and this teaching and this revelation, this insight from God, a God who loves and is with us and is around us and cares. And yet we live in a world where there is injustice, it flourishes, or it seems to. The Vladimir Putins of this world run evil across the world and do their thing, narcissistic violence and abuse of power. where people are hungry and they starve to death or die from simple diseases because they can't access basic medicines, or where the earth itself is crying out under the weight of human oppression and creatures are dying and becoming extinct, where the very earth itself is threatened, or where refugees from wars and oppressions and persecution cry out desperately for a place of safety and comfort where they can live in some sort of freedom with their family. All these cries and this pain that rings up each day. And I guess in our prayers, both formal and conscious prayers, or the yearnings of our heart when we see the desperation of other people's lives, goes out to this God we may name or not name, this God who is, but nothing seems to change. And so we might ask, well, what does Jesus actually mean? What is Luke actually talking about? Where is this God? How is God going to change this world? Will God? Does God? What's happening in our world? And where is God in it? And I guess these are important questions. But maybe the story is not about that. Maybe the story is turning us upside down in our world. When I cry out to God to listen to the cries of the poor and the disenfranchised and those who have been denied justice, or the refugees, or the earth itself, God, hear the cries of these people, hear the cries of the earth, and do something. Maybe God is inviting me to ask a different question. Maybe God is saying back to me, Jeff, do you hear the cries of the poor? Do you hear the cries of the refugee? Do you hear the cries of the impoverished widow, or the earth and its creatures? And if so, what are you doing about it? Are you in fact like that unjust judge, that magistrate who cared not for God or people and wishes the issues would go away? Are you trying to divert the cries that you hear to me in the hope that I might do something magical and change the world, turn people's values and opinions and ideas around like that? Is that what you're asking, Jeff? Because that's not how it works. Just like I've given you free will to choose and make your choices, because that's what love is about, freedom. So does Vladimir Putin and others. And we've got to live with that consequence. But if you hear the cries of the poor, if you see the person in the street who is struggling and impoverished, if you hear the stories of refugees, or the cry of the earth itself, will you listen? Or do you need it to come and come and come persistently until you change? If you feel the angst and the despair and the desperation, will you do something? Will you be changed by your praying? The more you pray to me, the more I will turn those prayers more deeply back into you and invite you to be transformed so that you may be the voice, the hands, the feet, the heart of me in the world. And how will you change the world? By being persistent, by being dogged, by not giving up hope, faith or love, but allowing these to transform you and the little bit of the world around you and spread out. You can make a little difference, and that little difference might actually be a big difference in someone's lives. There's a program, when I was in the Hawkesbury region, there was a program that Rebecca Andrews and her sister Shelley Horton and Rebecca's daughter Sally set up. Shelley was working in in West Papua. And I've told this story before, but she was working in West Papua amongst the indigenous people who were overrun and overwhelmed by the Indonesian society that took over that part of the land. And when she finished the work and had to leave, her and Rebecca asked, well, what can we do here? What can we leave? How can we help these people in their poverty and their struggle? And the answer was, we need fresh water. And so they devised a way of building wells for villages that would serve families of four and five families. And it was a simple manual process, and the team was trained. And out here, they raised funds. Simple, just funds, just raise money, send it over. The team could then build a well. $2,500 built a well that gave a village water for 50 years. Simple. It didn't cost us much, but it made a huge difference in their lives. And I think it's the persistence of Rebecca and Shelley and Sally, their persistence in going around and telling the story, sharing the story, and their enthusiasm and passion that has made that such an important project and helped so many different people in a simple but profound way in the world. Listening to the cries and responding. And we can look at Martin Luther King Jr., we can look at Gandhi, we can look at Mother Teresa, we can look at Dorothy Day, we can look at many, many people. We can look at the people in our own lives and world who just reach out in simple little ways, not giving up hope, trusting and believing that one little act of kindness on top of another, on top of another, on top of another will make a difference in people's lives. And justice and hope and life will come. Jesus invites us to be persistent, to live in this world where there is desperation and despair, but to live with hope and faith and love, and to trust in this God who can use us to make a big difference in our own little efforts. How about you? Will you follow this way of Jesus?